healthy people in healthy communities.
Always be prepared and practice safety before, during, and after a storm. Before a storm, block your roof gutters. Take the time to store water in bottles, jugs, buckets, and bathtubs for drinking, cooking, and flushing. After the storm, clear the roof of debris before unblocking gutters. And boil water before drinking and food preparation to reduce potential contamination. This is a message from the Department of Health.
Good afternoon, Bermuda. Sorry for being a few minutes late this evening. Thank you, members of the media, for your attendance today. For today's press conference, I am joined by the Minister of Health, the Honorable Kim Wilson, the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Renee Ming, the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabane, and the Minister of Labor, the Honorable Jason Hayward. First up, I will invite the Minister of Health to give an update on matters from her ministry and also changes to the public health emergency regulations that were approved by the Cabinet when it met on Tuesday. Minister of Health.
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, there were 903 test results received by the Minister of Health, and none were positive for COVID-19. Bermuda has had 168 total confirmed cases, and their status is as follows. 151 have fully recovered, and there are 8 active cases who are all under public health monitoring. None are hospitalized or in critical care, and the total deceased remains at 9. The average age of all of our confirmed positive cases is 58, and the age range of all of our positive cases is from 18 to 101 years. The source of all local cases is as follows. 61 are imported, 86 are local transmission with known contact, 19 are local transmission with an unknown contact, and 2 are under investigation. Bermuda's country status remains at sporadic cases, and the 7-day average of our real-time reproduction number is less than 1. As I announced last week, the Cabinet reviewed the traveler requirements for passengers arriving to Bermuda without a valid pre-departure test. And as of Tuesday this week, all travelers arriving in Bermuda without a pre-departure test will now be required to test on arrival and quarantine for at least 8 days. They will require a negative test result after their day 8 to be released from quarantine, and this means that they will not have to do a test on day 4. Importantly, the pre-departure test must be taken in the country from which you are departing. That is, a test is taken in Bermuda will never count as a pre-departure test on your return to Bermuda. As I have said previously, we actively encourage residents to avoid non-essential travel at this time. Remember, we are in the midst of a pandemic. But if you must travel, it is best to get a pre-departure test before you return to Bermuda. This will keep you safe and prevent the mandatory 8-day quarantine upon your return. I also want to take this opportunity to highlight a further update on the guidance with respect to workplace recommendations for medium exposed risk jobs for those who do return to work after travel. The risk level may apply to workers who have frequent or close contact with the people in high population density work environments or tasks that require close and frequent contact between co-workers or between members of the public. And examples of this type of work include schools, daycare centers, and daycare providers, as well as camps, and this applies to both the workers and the attendees, retail stores, construction, police, public transportation, and gyms, and this applies to workers and attendees. Our travel policy recommendations is that ideally employers Employees, should not return to work until they receive their day 14 test results. Employees should work remotely if possible. If this is not possible, employees should at least wait for their day 8 test results. The employee must comply with testing and quarantine requirements, wear a mask, wash your hands frequently, and keep a physical distance of 6 feet from others. For more information, please review the Safe Return to Work After Travel Guidance located at coronavirus.gov.bm. I quickly want to touch on what we call mobile quarantine, which is the period between when travelers are released from self-quarantine after their day 14 results. Those under mobile quarantine should follow these 10 requirements. 1, do not attend events with large groups, such as weddings, parties, and family gatherings. 2, keep their social bubble small, if at all. Exercise outside and not in a gym or sports club or team. Keep away from crowded places. Wear a mask in all public places. Wash your hands regularly. Stay 6 feet from others. Choose activities that are outdoors. Stay out of closed spaces with poor ventilation. And do not visit elderly or immunocompromised friends or family. And finally, in the wake of the most recent cases, there have been some questions raised about what constitutes a close contact, and I will try to provide some clarity around that point. When a positive case of COVID-19 is identified in the community, the Ministry of Health begins a process known as contact tracing, and that is to determine who that person may have been in contact with and may have infected. A person can either be a close contact or a casual contact. A close contact means persons spending more than 15 minutes of face-to-face contact within 6 feet of an infected person in any setting, living in the same house or shared accommodations as an infected person, or sitting within 2 seats of an infected person in any direction on an airplane. Whereas a casual contact means spending less than 15 minutes of face-to-face contact within 6 feet of an infected person in any setting, being in the same room as with an infected person for less than 2 hours, being on an airplane with an infected person but not sitting near them. Spending more than 2 hours in a closed space, such as an office or classroom, with an infected person can either be a close contact or a casual contact, depending on the circumstances. And whether it's classified as a casual or close contact will depend on the size of the room and other factors, and most importantly, the health officials will let you know if you are at risk or not. If you are a close contact of a case, you must complete a 14-day quarantine and should, under no circumstances, attend testing sites during that period or leave your home quarantine. Remember that a breach in quarantine is an offense. Close contacts do not get tested on days 4 or days 8 like travelers. Rather, they are tested on day 14 at a location that's designated by the epidemiology and surveillance units. Furthermore, employers of persons who are close contacts cannot require employees to test during their quarantine period or in excess of the instructions given by the Ministry of Health's Epidemiology and Surveillance Unit. So to be clear, employers cannot request the breaking of quarantine for additional testing from their employees who are close contacts of a case. During these 14 days of quarantine, a case manager will phone you to monitor any symptoms which you may have. If you develop any symptoms of coronavirus, call your GP. You'll usually find out if you are a close contact because you will be monitored by the Ministry of Health's contact tracing team. If you are a casual contact, you should make sure that you know what the symptoms of coronavirus are and be aware that you may develop them. You do not need to restrict your movement. If you develop symptoms of coronavirus, you will need to self-isolate and phone your GP straight away to get a test for coronavirus. It is important to note that persons who are close contacts of a case should not book their own COVID-19 test appointments, nor should they attend any of the pop-up testing sites, as it disrupts the processes of test results. Persons who are close contact should follow the guidance that is given to them by the Epidemiology and Surveillance Department. In addition, I would like to remind everyone that there are 3 cases currently of sporadic local transmission, and our guards need to be up. None of us can be complacent at this time. Bermuda and the world is still experiencing a pandemic, and without the precautions we all know, such as mask wearing, physical distancing, and hand washing, one case can easily multiply and spread. And it is for this reason, as we continue to live our daily lives in the new normal, we have to accept that we are not back to normal, and neither are many of the health services. With the return to school, there will definitely impact some of the services usually provided by the Department of Health staff, who now have to be utilized to control and contain COVID-19. So we ask for your patience in this matter. Ultimately, if there is an outbreak, we will have no schools at all to attend. So we have to use our manpower to ensure schools and the economy can remain open safely. Finally, before closing, I must highlight that while we are seeing excellent compliance by the public in many settings, this is not the case across the board. Our reopening indications for mask wearing and physical distance remain in the red, which is under 79% of compliance, meaning that people are taking unnecessary risk. We see this especially at private events and on boats. I'm sure many of you would have seen the video footage from the raft up this past weekend, which was truly a petri dish of COVID-19 transmission. Had one person been positive, everyone on that raft up would now be in quarantine and unable to work. Unfortunately, it is for this reason that we will be amending the public health regulations to limit raft ups to a maximum of 3 boats. And I remind the public that physical distancing is required on commercial boats or party boats, as well as private boats if households are mixed. We need our reopening indicators on green now more than ever, so please practice prevention and report on your Health IQ app. I end by reminding us all to avoid the 3 C's: closed spaces, crowded spaces, and close contact settings. And always wear your mask. Stay safe, Bermuda, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister of Health, and much appreciation certainly to the work and efforts of your entire Ministry of Health team who have scaled up Bermuda's testing and continue to ensure that we set an example to the rest of the world. Next will be the Minister of National Security, who will provide an update on matters within her ministry, including the enforcement of the changes to the public health emergency regulations announced by the Minister of Health.
Good evening, Bermuda. As this is our final media briefing, I wish to take this opportunity to provide a full overview of the work done by the various departments under the Ministry of National Security. Each of the individuals who work in these sections performed a vital, essential, and invaluable service during this pandemic, and their work continues. Some of the highlights worth sharing are as follows. The Bermuda Police Service and the Royal Bermuda Regiment provided a critical frontline role over the last 5 months. Working in partnership, the BPS and the Royal Bermuda Regiment monitored the roadside checkpoints during the curfew periods. The Bermuda Police Service and the regiment also worked 24/7 during our phased reopening process to ensure that residents and the businesses adhere to the COVID-19 guidelines and regulations that were in place. Specifically as it relates to the Royal Bermuda Regiment, its embodiment since March the 19th represents the longest embodiment in Bermuda since World War II. The Royal Bermuda Regiment's mission has been to support the Bermuda government in its COVID-19 response, and this mission has been fulfilled on land and at sea in the following ways. Shelter in place, excuse me, and curfew period. During the shelter-in-place period, the regiment mounted advisory points day and night across the island to ensure that the COVID-19 guidelines were followed. When the shelter-in-place period ended, the Royal Bermuda Regiment had registered 270,000 advisory checks. Public patrols. During and after the shelter-in-place period, the regiment patrolled public spaces to advise people of the physical distancing regulations and to gather information that would guide government policy. Health worker transport. During the shelter-in-place period, the regiment provided bus monitors so that the Department of Transport could transfer essential workers. Repatriation flights. The Royal Bermuda Regiment provided both transportation and soldiers to help process the repatriation flights, thus ensuring our residents proceeded safely from the aircraft to their quarantine area. Testing facilities. The Royal Bermuda Regiment supported the Department of Health's testing program by the regiment, providing soldiers to assist in managing the testing sites. Bermuda Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has conducted the roles of over 16 hours a day of on-water coverage, and in conjunction with the Bermuda Maritime Operations Center, has been providing a 24-hour search and rescue response. They have issued 80 summonses for COVID-19 breaches and enforced quarantine measures for visiting vessels at anchor in Bermuda. Throughout this period, the regiment kept precise records of movement which were used by the government to inform decisions and assist in transition periods. The Royal Bermuda Regiment maintains a 48-hour notice to move if required to respond to a second wave or if threatened by a hurricane. The Royal Bermuda Regiment are the pride of Bermuda, and next month, the regiment will welcome the next set of recruits. If there are any persons interested in joining the Royal Bermuda Regiment in service of the country, please visit www.rbr.bm for more information or to sign up. The Disaster Risk Reduction and Mitigation Team. Over the past 5 months, in order to manage the COVID-19 crisis, the Disaster Risk Reduction and Mitigation Team, better known as DERM, led 38 emergency measures organization meetings to coordinate health and public safety response efforts. Some of the DERM team's highlights are as follows. 16 pieces of legislation were passed, including 2 summary offenses curfew orders, 6 emergency powers shelter-in-place regulations, and 8 emergency powers continuing precautions regulations. The DERM team also managed the government quarantine facilities. Members of the team oversaw the logistics for arriving flights, arriving passengers, and coordinated the full management of the 6 quarantine facilities. Regarding the curfew exemptions, the DERM team managed much of this process. More specifically, the DERM team received in excess of 5,000 applications for exemptions under the Emergency Powers Shelter-in-Place regulations. Under the Emergency Powers legislation, permissions were also granted by the DERM team to allow approved businesses to open during the shelter-in-place period and during the various phases of reopening. Regarding exemptions for large groups and gatherings, to date, around 30 exemptions have been granted. The DERM team also worked with the Third Sector's Coordinated Crisis Response Effort, CCRE, to align the needs of essential service providers with resources during the COVID-19 pandemic. Switching to the prison service. In March, the Department of Corrections immediately implemented a response team to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. The team was tasked with identifying response phases, ensuring that any risks associated with COVID-19 were mitigated and minimized. The response team also finalized the department's pandemic plan during this period. During phase 1 of the pandemic plan, the Department of Corrections executed the following. All inmate day passes were immediately suspended and adjustments made to the reception procedures for inmates, i.e. pre-screening of inmates. In-house visits were suspended. Implementation of a 14-day quarantine for inmates received into custody commenced. Once there were confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Bermuda, the Department of Corrections took the following actions: canceled all face-to-face visits and substituted them with virtual visits, suspended the work release program until further notice, suspended non-emergency escorts, and mandated non-security staff to work remotely. The Department of Corrections implemented its recovery plan on May 4th, which was in alignment with the government of Bermuda's reopening plans. At this time, non-security staff have returned to work on a phased basis. Additionally, COVID-19 testing took place for inmates during the last 2 weeks of May. All results were negative, and there have been no confirmed cases of COVID-19 among staff or inmates to date. On June 11th, the Department of Corrections commenced Phase 3 of its recovery plan. On-site inmates' visits continue to be suspended, and virtual visits and phone calls to friends and family are continued. 80% of the non-security staff returned to work at the facilities with staggered scheduling. Contractors were allowed into the facilities for emergency repairs. The Department of Corrections must be commended for working diligently under very stressful conditions throughout this pandemic. As we continue to move to a new norm, the Acting Commissioner of the Department of Corrections will continue to monitor the risk levels and put measures in place to mitigate these risks so that the operations can fully resume. Lastly, a few words regarding the work of the Gang Violence Reduction Team led by Pastor Leroy Bean. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused significant socioeconomic challenges for a large portion of our community. What we have come to understand during this pandemic is that social and financial instability leads to stress and added tension, and added tensions can often lead to antisocial behavior and violence. In response to the Gang Violence Reduction Team, along with the Coordinated Crisis Response Unit, they have worked hard during the pandemic addressing tensions and maintaining a presence in our at-risk neighborhoods. The Gang Violence Reduction Team have provided our affected families, individuals, and young people with much-needed emotional support, counseling, and emergency services during these times of hardship. We are incredibly grateful for the efforts of the Gang Violence Reduction Mitigation Team, who have worked very hard under some difficult circumstances to keep Bermuda's neighborhoods and communities safe. Finally, as I close, I would be remiss if I did not express a note of thanks to the former Minister of National Security, Wayne Keynes, JPMP. From the onset of the pandemic, the former minister demonstrated his commitment and dedication to keeping our island safe by mobilizing and coordinating the resources within the ministry and throughout the community. MP Keynes was on the front lines each day, standing shoulder to shoulder with our essential workers, making sure that Bermuda and its people were protected. One of the aspects during this process that he was most passionate about was ensuring that our most vulnerable were cared for at the government shelter. Through his passion and determination, he ensured that the residents at the shelter received clean clothing, showered daily, and ate balanced meals 3 times a day. They also received medical care and treatment services. The Ministry of National Security takes this opportunity to thank MP Keynes for his service, his guidance, and his invaluable contribution during this pandemic. Bermuda. The pandemic has no doubt affected the entire world in a way that most of us have never seen before, and its effects on our island are no different. But we have managed this crisis extremely well, thanks in large part to the critical work of our essential workers within the Ministry of National Security. COVID-19 continues to be with us. We all have a responsibility to do what we can to mitigate the spread of the virus and comply with the policies put in place. I urge residents, please do not become complacent. Please continue to follow the health guidelines and recommendations in place to protect you and your families. One final word regarding raft ops. There has been a change to the regulations. No more than 3 boats tied to each other, such as rafting, will be allowed. You will now be aware that the Ministry of National Security has increased the group assembly size from 50 persons to 75 persons. These regulations fall under the Public Health Regulations Section 53A. Approvals are subject to consultation with the Ministry of Health. I'm happy to advise the general public that guidelines and the application form for large group exemptions are available on the government portal, www.gov.bm. If you see any breaches of the COVID-19 regulations by persons or businesses, please do not hesitate to call 211 to report the violations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ming. And the country is certainly grateful to the work of your ministry and to the frontline workers for their service during the pandemic. As school gets ready to go back in, the Minister of Education is here to provide an update to the public on the work being done to enable the safe reopening of our public schools. Minister of Education.
Thank you, Premier. Good evening, Bermuda. In just over 2 weeks, Bermuda's public schools will reopen to students on Monday, September 14th. As we prepare to welcome our students back to their schools and classrooms, principals and staff are busy implementing protocols and plans for the start of the new school year. As a reminder, schools will reopen to all students on September 14th, except for those deemed extremely clinically vulnerable, those in isolation or quarantine due to travel, and those who are sick. We've received several queries about our S3 and S4 senior school students based on the previous announcement that all students under the age of 16 will be expected in the school buildings when school reopens. Both senior schools are finalizing their particular guidelines, and parents will be contacted next week with those schedules. However, as mentioned above, schools will reopen for all students on September 14th. As I am sure that we all understand, the school experience for our staff and students will be different this year. In this regard, there are a few matters that we would like to bring to attention to our parents. Principals and staff. Our school principals return to work this week, Monday, August 24th, and are completing final plans for accepting our students. We know that parents want to hear from our children's principals, and this information is forthcoming. At this point, principals are adjusting early morning entry procedures, school schedules, walking through the school buildings with custodians, planning recovery week activities, and receiving school hygiene supplies. Our teachers will return to school next week, Tuesday, September the 1st. They will be engaged in training on new safety and health protocols, professional development focused on teaching and learning and organizing and preparing their classrooms for receiving their students. School entry procedures. All schools will start early screenings at 8:30 a.m. each day. Therefore, parents are urged to begin pre-planning in advance if needed, as students will not be able to access school buildings before 8:30 a.m. Our school leaders are very concerned about students being on premises unattended before 8:30 a.m., as there are risks for parents leaving students on the premises unattended, as staff will not be available to supervise physical distancing or other health-related protocols. Parents are advised that children with elevated temperatures will not be able to enter school buildings. In such instances, parents may have to remain home with the child on short notice or take the child to a caregiver. as parents may be called during their workday if their child is not well and asked to collect their child promptly, as schools cannot keep sick children on site for long periods during COVID-19 pandemic. While these measures will have implications for families, they are necessary to protect others from risk. We do understand the difficulties imposed by the pandemic on the community. However, due to school entry procedures, parents with school-age children may find it difficult arriving to work on time, particularly if they have more than one child and have to travel to different schools. As a community, we have come together to assist each other through this pandemic, and the response has been phenomenal. We are asking employers to continue to be supportive of our parents as we navigate through this new norm. Parents, we encourage you to be proactive and talk to your employers ahead of time to discuss your particular situation. Power School and communication. Parents are reminded to ensure they have a parent portal in the Power School app. If you are a parent in the system for the first time, you will be contacted by the Department of Education with setup instructions. Power School is a powerful tool used by schools and gives parents access to student attendance, student performance, and other information that will help you support your child's education while at home. Our live panel discussions. The general public is invited to join in a live panel discussion with the Commissioner of Education on Monday, August 31st, on the topic of staff and student well-being. Parents can also view the previous panel discussions that were held this week on the Bermuda Public School Facebook page or the CITV YouTube channel. Also, the Commissioner of Education will host Zoom meetings on September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. for students to participate and ask questions. Students are invited to chat with the Commissioner about returning to the classroom in the era of COVID-19. Chats are as follows: senior school students, Tuesday, September the 1st, middle school students, Wednesday, September the 2nd, and primary school students, Thursday, September the 3rd. Children are encouraged to bring their questions, suggestions, and concerns about returning to the classroom in September. To register, students can go to the Facebook group for their level or visit www.moed.bm. Let me take this opportunity at this time to thank the Department of Education, the Department of Health staff, principals, teachers, other staff, and parents for participating in the live panel discussions that took place earlier in the month. Your participation exemplifies working together for the common good of successfully reopening schools for the benefit of children, families, and our community. Parents should also know that the Department of Education is asking for specific feedback on school reopening. The input of our parents is essential to us. So we encourage parents to complete a school reopening survey, which is included in the Scoops, the Bermuda Public Schools newsletter that has been emailed out. And we also will place the survey on our website at www.moed.bm. The general election. As Thursday, October 1st is Election Day, all public schools will be closed as several school buildings will be used as election polling stations. Consequently, school buildings will be physically closed to staff and students on Friday, October the 2nd, to ensure schools are thoroughly cleaned before staff and students physically return to school on Monday, October 5th. However, children and school staff will be engaged in a full day of remote learning on Friday, October the 2nd. As a reminder, an updated school academic calendar will be posted on our website, www.moed.bm, and on www.gov.bm. In closing, let me say that these are unprecedented times for all of us. There will be challenges ahead, but working together in partnership, we can overcome them. We will reopen schools responsibly, and always the safety, health, and well-being of our staff and students is our greatest priority. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you very much, Minister Ravane, and certainly great work by your team, consisting, of course, of the team at the Ministry and the Department of Education, principals, teachers, support staff, the wider government for the assistance in putting together the plan to ensure that our schools can safely reopen. I am certain that many parents, including myself, are looking forward to September 14th. The final minister to speak before I close will be Minister Hayward, who will discuss the continued financial support in place for persons who have found themselves unable to work due to the pandemic, and the work his ministry is doing to streamline the process of that assistance. Minister?
Good evening. As many of you are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused unemployment for thousands in our community due to no fault of their own. In March, when the government began immediately safety measures to protect the people of Bermuda, we also immediately implemented the 16-week unemployment benefit to support families during this unprecedented time. Now, as the unemployment benefit comes to an end, the government is aware that many in our community are still in need of assistance. To address this, government created the supplemental unemployment benefit and allocated funds to financially support individuals who remain in need. To be clear, the supplemental unemployment benefit is only for Bermudians and spouses of Bermudians who do not qualify for support through the Department of Financial Assistance, yet still require financial assistance from the government. To confirm eligibility for the supplemental unemployment benefit, applicants must undergo a means test administered by the Department of Financial Assistance. But it must be noted that the eligibility requirements for the supplementary unemployment benefit are different from financial assistance, and determinations will be made based on individual merit. It is also important to note that the eligibility for financial assistance does not mean a person will not be eligible for the supplementary unemployment benefit. When applying, individuals need only submit an application package to the Department of Financial Assistance. If an individual has already applied for financial assistance within the last 6 months, the process is simply to request that your initial file be reactivated. However, it remains your responsibility to submit the outstanding information for vetting. All supplementary unemployment benefit recipients will receive monthly payments. Those recipients who already have health insurance will receive a flat monthly payment, while persons without health insurance will receive their health insurance premium in addition to their flat monthly payment. It is important to note that the insurance premiums will be paid directly to the Health Insurance Department. The Supplementary Unemployment Benefit Program is scheduled to run until March 31st, 2020, and recipients will receive a monthly flat rate of $1,520, with some individuals receiving an additional monthly payment of $429 for their health insurance premium. Since the initial announcement that further financial assistance will be offered to those in need, either through the Standard Financial Assistance Program or the Supplementary Unemployment Benefit, we have distributed over 683 applications. As of the 26th of August, 2020, 55% of all applications returned to the department were in various stages of processing due to incomplete submissions. The department has communicated with applicants to request missing documentation and verify information submitted. If someone knows of persons in need, I ask you to speak with that individual and ask them to apply for assistance. I am asking individuals, put aside your uneasiness and think about how this additional aid can help support your family through these challenging times. Please visit the Department of Financial Assistance to obtain an application package. Fully complete the application package and submit together with the requested documents for consideration as soon as possible. If persons require assistance completing the forms, they must make that request at the reception desk. Applicants must also ensure that the name of the government-issued picture ID matches their documents. You should also note that the Parliamentary Registrar's Office has ceased the printing of voter ID cards until September 9th, 2020. And remember, as per the requirements for persons on any kind of government financial assistance, beneficiaries must immediately notify government when commencing any form of employment. Lastly, in speaking with members of the public, I understand there is some concern regarding the application itself and confusion surrounding the application process. I can advise that the Department of Financial Assistance have streamlined the application process by removing some of the forms ordinarily required. A downloadable information sheet on the supplementary unemployment benefit is currently located in the resource section of the Financial Assistance Department's website at www.gov.bm. I will now walk you through the application process step by step. 1. Individuals wishing to apply must first collect an application package from the Department of Financial Assistance located on the first floor of Global House, 43 Church Street, Hamilton. Packages can only be collected from Monday to Thursday between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. If you are unable to collect an application package, you must contact the Department of Financial Assistance hotline at 297-7867 to make alternative arrangements. You will not initially speak with a representative as the system is geared to receive messages. Once your message is heard, a representative will return your call. The application must be taken away and 100% completed to be considered for assistance. Once filled out, the application and necessary documents must be submitted to the Department of Financial Assistance mailbox located on the first floor of Global House. All applications received will be vetted and applications will be notified of their status accordingly. Where information is missing or outstanding, the department will give you a couple of courtesy calls as a reminder that they await your information. If your application is successful, you will begin receiving the approved monthly award payments using a cashless system that deposits payments directly into your bank account or provides direct payments to vendors on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hayward, and I'm grateful for the work that you and your ministry continue to do to ensure those who require assistance get the assistance of which they need. In my remarks tonight, I would first like to start from a topic which is on many persons' mind, certainly, and that is the general election. I would like to advise that I spoke with the governor this week to ensure him that the parliamentary registrar will be supplied with whatever she deems necessary in order to ensure that the country has a safe election, and that is whatever PPE supplies or other materials are necessary. The parliamentary registrar will meet with the Ministry of Health and put in place the appropriate protocols for every polling station, and additionally to that, I advise the governor that whatever testing capacity is necessary or needed, we will work to ensure that it is delivered. So there is no question about a safe exercise of democracy. The Parliamentary Registry Office will also have strict guidelines in place when they visit members of our community who are sick and shut in and who would like to vote. And the Parliamentary Registrar will share that guidance in the coming weeks. Before I move on, I just want to say this. We have adjusted our lives to grocery shop safely. We have changed the way we worship to do so safely. And for the most part, we have socialized safely. I have every confidence that we can vote safely too. Secondly, I can advise that because of significant amendments to the Parliamentary Election Act that the government passed in July, this election will be the fairest and most inclusive in Bermuda's history. Prior to the amendments, there was no provision for visually impaired voters to exercise their right in private. According to our most recent census, this development will affect more than 2,300 Bermudians. To ensure their ballot was not spoiled, visually impaired or blind voters required an officer to oversee them marking their ballot. While the intent was to ensure a physical disability did not prevent a voter from exercising their right, it was neither an ideal nor independent process. Accordingly, the parliamentary registrar has authorized the use of devices that allow voters to select their preferred candidate after an audio prompt. The device brings equality to the process. As I'm speaking about expanding the right to vote, the amendments also gave the registrar the power to enlarge the category of persons who can vote at an advance poll. Previously, only people who were traveling and would not be on island or those involved in working in the elections could vote in advance. I should advise that this year the advance poll will take place during the week of September the 14th. In the past, travelers had to take proof of travel to the registrar days before the poll, and they would receive a certificate. On the day, they would take the certificate to the advance poll and vote. Now voters only need to bring a hard copy of their travel documents to the advance poll, and assuming that the documents are valid, they will be issued a certificate on site and allowed to vote. Another significant amendment is related to COVID-19, and in an attempt to reassure seniors and reduce risk to their health and well-being, seniors will be allowed to vote at the advance poll. The major benefit is that there are significantly fewer people, meaning more time can be given to assist seniors. The government considered this option after consultation with the parliamentary registrar and health officials, and concluded that this was the best way to balance the exercise of voting rights with the exercise of caution. And finally, for the first time, parolees will be able to vote. In Bermuda, incarcerated individuals do not have the right to vote generally, as voting is considered a right of living in community or society. However, when someone is released on parole and they are therefore not incarcerated, they still did not have the right to vote until their full sentence had expired. In 2020, parolees now have the right to vote. As I move on to the management of the pandemic from a technology perspective, it is important to note that technology will be ever more important as we look to manage the impacts of the virus going forward. Our information and digital technology team has been working hard to launch a pilot of our own Bluetooth contact tracing app using the protocol developed by Apple and Google. The app has been developed by COVID Watch, a nonprofit organization that evolved out of a research collaboration between Stanford University and the University of Waterloo. The COVID Watch app is presently being used for a pilot with the University of Arizona prior to the adoption by the state of Arizona, and is being considered for additional pilots within universities in California. The app itself uses the Apple-Google protocol, which was developed in accordance with leading global research to ensure privacy in contact tracing efforts, and it will be launched and managed by COVID Watch and not by the government of Bermuda directly. The health team will be provided with the ability to generate a unique code that can be shared with an individual who is tested positive, which will notify any users that individual was in close contact with and could be at risk, without any indication of who it has come from or the location or date of the potential exposure, so preserving full anonymity. Those notified individuals would be encouraged to contact the health team to assist with monitoring and treatment should they develop the virus. By design, the government itself does not collect or have access to any of the details to whom you were in contact with or where, which will be signed off by the primary privacy commissioner before launch. So it is important to note that we have designed and taken the time to make sure that we get this right. There have been many countries where these things have been attempted, but because they rushed these things to get them out to market, they did not take into account all of the considerations. We have made sure that we have put this in place in combination with research universities in the United States and Canada. They will be managing this for us, so we know that we will have the best of breed app that preserves privacy so we can have the widest possible penetration to allow more of us to go about our routines. Putting on my tourism hat, I would like to acknowledge that the Bermuda Business Development Agency and the Bermuda Tourism Authority staff are creatively working to ensure the world knows that we are open for business and a safe jurisdiction. We are beginning to see increased airline capacity, and next month we will have double the capacity that we had in July, and we are forecasting to be at 60% capacity in October. Yesterday, I was able to participate in a webinar jointly hosted by the BDA and the BTA and the World Travel and Tourism Council with over 100 participants. I discussed our Work from Bermuda campaign and was on a panel with someone who had applied, approved, and has already moved to Bermuda. Capitalizing on our innovation, safety, and agility to quickly create this initiative is exactly what Bermuda has been known for: originality and leadership. Another important development for the tourism industry and for Bermuda as a whole is the reopening of the Hamilton Princess tomorrow. Once it reopens, Bermuda will be at just over 60% of our available hotel inventory, with many more Bermudians going back to work to be able to provide for their families. These impressive results can only be achieved because the Cabinet, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Transport, Airport Authority, and the Bermuda Tourism Authority have come together to work in unison for Bermuda. We have a long way to go, but the recovery of our tourism industry is well underway. Since March, the chief objective of our COVID-19 government press conferences has been to provide information that keeps our community safe. Bermuda has delivered on that safety mission better than almost any place in the world, and you do not have to take my word for it. Earlier this month, the Centers for Disease Control improved the island's ranking to level 2, one of only 4 places in the world assessed with a moderate risk level. It is a very short list, and we should be proud of Bermuda's collective efforts. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office tells British travelers that Bermuda is safe, so when they do return from Bermuda, they do not have to return to 14-day quarantine. And tonight, I'm pleased to announce that for the first time, the World Travel and Tourism Council has designated Bermuda as a safe travels destination. This special designation means that Bermuda has adopted health and hygiene standards that meet the highest global protocols. And now our country will have the privilege of using the Safe Travel Stamp, a seal quickly becoming highly recognized and valued around the world because health safety has never been so important to travelers. The CDC, the FCO, and the World Travel and Tourism Council. All of these third-party evaluations confirm what our community already knows and what our Bermuda Tourism Authority and our Bermuda Business Development Agency will share to the world, that Bermuda is safer. This, of course, is really good news for our tourism industry, and it will be shared around the world. But that good news started here at home. If our community had not followed the rules and made sacrifices, there is no chance that Bermuda would have found itself so far ahead of other countries. And so as the Minister for Tourism, I offer my thanks to all of you. And without question, I know that there's a group of persons that also thank Bermudians for doing what is necessary, and that are the many hotel workers who have been able to return back to work to provide for their families. As summer kicked in, we were able to safely reopen our economy. Many people, particularly younger people, have seemingly become complacent and are socializing, partying, and rafting up without taking the proper care. There is worldwide acknowledgement that the second waves that are beginning to impact countries are due to the behavior of young people being carefree, which is a perk of youth. I wish to warn those who think that this is the time to be cavalier. While you may wish to take risks, if you are not wearing a mask, if you are breaking quarantine, if you are gathered in a place where there is not the social distancing being practiced and you put yourself at risk of exposure, the risk is not only to you, it is to your parents, uncles, aunts, and grandparents. Your immune system may be able to fight off the coronavirus, but experience shows that older people are having the worst recovery results. I implore you to please act right. And if you cannot, regulations will be enforced to ensure proper behavior that doesn't cause the type of spread that we have successfully avoided. That is the reason for the changes announced today in the restrictions of raft-ups to no more than 3 boats. We've all seen the images from this past weekend of the raft-up that took place, and it seems as though if persons are being less and less careful and more cavalier. I urge boat owners who may host these raft-ups in violation of the law to not test the new Minister of National Security. Our job is not to punish anyone. Our job is to do what is necessary to make the changes in law to make sure that we keep the country safe. No one wants to roll back what we've done because we all recognize the economic pain that that causes. I will pause here to acknowledge the work of a young Bermudian who wrote to me earlier this week. Ms. Jade Robinson is a pre-medical student completing her Masters of Public Health at King's College in London and a former volunteer for the COVID-19 Southside swabbing site. She is also a volunteer in Public Health Core Group for a UK-based charity, Cove 360. She collaborated with Cove 360 to produce a documentary and recorded the crucial work that the staff of the Southside swabbing site have done to keep our community safe. The video was played earlier on CITV and will be repeated in the coming days. And the video can also be seen on the government's social media pages. Before I close, I want to spend a few minutes acknowledging the work on the Office of the Chief Medical Officer, specifically the work of Dr. Cheryl Peak Ball, as she retires from her office on Monday, the 31st of August. Dr. Pete Ball joined the Ministry of Health in 1990 as a medical officer with maternal health and family planning. She became the senior medical officer in 2009, the acting CMO, and then the substantive CMO from 2012. I am sure when Dr. Pete Ball announced her retirement last year, she did not expect to face a truly global pandemic, especially since the last one was over 100 years ago. For those of you who have met Dr. Pete Ball, she is indeed one of those people you will never forget. She has a calm and reassuring manner with the wisdom and analysis of a scientist. She has provided outstanding guidance and support to the Minister of Health and the Cabinet, and that means that she has ably served the country. Her expertise allowed the Cabinet to make informed decisions about movement, how we make sure we restrict the spread of the virus, and also in regards to our healthcare capacity. I wish to thank her on behalf of a grateful nation. She has served Bermuda with outstanding professionalism, and she deserves the break that she will get from next week, Monday. Thank you, Dr. Pete Ball. Dr. Pete Ball will give her last interview as Bermuda's Chief Medical Officer on Monday, the 31st of August at 11:30 a.m., at which time viewers will meet the incoming CMO, Dr. Ayula Oyinloye. Tune in to government's Facebook page and submit your questions, and that conversation can also be held on CITV. Last week, I stated that today would be our last weekly COVID press conference with a number of ministers, as the government must move to smaller confines, and we want to make sure that we maintain our physical distancing. However, the government has decided that it is necessary to continue with regular press conferences to make sure that we provide information to citizens, businesses, students, parents, workers, and our treasured seniors. School will start in the coming weeks, so we will make adjustments to the press conference schedule, but please note that we will continue to make sure that we keep you updated. With that, I am happy to take any questions from members of the media at this time.
Good evening, Don Burgess for Bermuda Broadcasting. Minister Hayward, yesterday at the BIU press conference, Chris Ferbert was talking about the financial assistance forms, and you mentioned earlier today they've been streamlined a little bit, and that was one of his complaints that he was having on behalf of his workers. The other was that he mentioned that it was taking 2 to 3 weeks to get these forms and move them along in the process, whether or not they're going to be on FA or the new supplemental. Can you just give us a bit more detail as to what's happening with streamlining? You said you took some pages out, and anything that can be done to make the process faster.
Good evening. The forms have been streamlined a bit, and we are not requiring all the information that will typically be required for persons that are making the applications to financial assistance. However, persons must note that the application process for the unemployment benefit is significantly different from that of the financial assistance benefit and the supplemental unemployment benefit, because this application requires you to be means tested. In order to be means tested, you need a minimum amount of information so that the department can make an informed decision. And so we have removed some documentation, but they must go through the full process of being means tested before they're approved.
Thank you. Health Minister, when will the saliva tests be deployed, and why haven't they been made available yet?
Tom, the saliva tests have been validated, and they actually have been deployed. They're being used to help with our surveillance at the airport for those persons that arrive in Bermuda without a pre-departure test.
But just at the airport, or all?
At this point, yes, at the airport, that's correct.
Thank you. We are still seeing a reduction in pop-up testing centers and days for non-arrival residents, and we are seeing an increase in long lines and wait times at the pop-up locations, none of which are in town. Is there a concern by focus heavily on the testing arriving passengers that we are now not testing widely enough in the community?
Actually, I wouldn't agree with that. We are testing very widely in the community. In fact, we have tested over 40,000 persons, and the vast majority of those are local residents as opposed to travelers. We've spoken about the need to continue to test with respect to those persons arriving in Bermuda, because that is our first arm of defense, so to speak, is to test using surveillance measures when persons arrive. With respect to the long lines, I think that it's important to note that as we continue to ramp up our testing, we will continue to see more persons getting tested, so the lines will continue. I'm not sure I would agree that, though you say that they're long, the fact is that the persons that are testing, particularly at pre-rot, we've indicated that pre-rot is for those persons that are travelers, and their percentage, we've received 90% rating from those persons that are utilizing PROTs for satisfaction. It's a covered area, there's a water filtration center, et cetera. When you see the long lines, it's indicative of persons getting tested, because we've tested over 40,000 persons, and we will continue to test. And as our economy opens up and hotels open up, as the Premier indicated with Hamilton Princess tomorrow, we continue to engage persons within the hotel industry to encourage them to get tested. So we'll continue to test, and we will continue to perhaps see lines, but the reality is it's important. If you get a test in, for example, Atlanta, you might wait 9 hours to get a pre-test, and you won't get it guaranteed within 7 to 10 days. So the reality is that's why we're getting the ratings and the accolades that the Premier spoke about from international agencies concerning our regime and the fact that we're safe, because we are testing, and we will continue to do that to ensure that you and I and everybody else that lives here and visits is safe.
Just as a follow-up to that, with the saliva test now starting to be deployed, will that speed up the times?
We are, like I said, the saliva test has been deployed at the airport for persons that arrive without a pre-departure test, and we are still in discussions as to rolling that out in other areas. Those are deliberations that are being discussed. In fact, there was a meeting this morning to discuss that. So those are part of the discussions. However, at this point, like I said, it is being deployed currently for those persons arriving without a pre-departure test.
Thank you. Some of the long lines are getting tested, especially in the heat. People are sort of put off by it. So like I saw photos, people waiting to go down to South Side on Sunday, and the line was almost down to where the turn was. What is causing the backlog, and what can be done to incentivize locals to get tested repeatedly?
Well, again, I wouldn't say that there's a backlog, and I don't think we need to incentivize locals if we've tested over 40,000 people there heretofore. So I think that the message is clear. If persons are going to get tested, and because of the rate of testing that we've done, I'm not sure we need any more incentives, because people are showing up to be tested. We've actually had persons called to book 2 weeks ago, and the September testing schedule hasn't even been placed yet. We are increasing our times with respect to testing and opening longer hours, more locations. I think it's indicative of the fact that people recognize the importance of testing, and in addition to the travelers being tested, locals also. And again, if I can use this as an opportunity to encourage persons that work within the essential services to also go, as well as beauty parlors and hair salons and so forth, to go and get themselves tested.
If I may just add for the Minister of Health, I just think, and I'm just chuckling for no other reason, Don, that if we look at our news, we see people in the United States waiting 8 and 9 hours for testing, and people might wait in line for 30 minutes in Bermuda, and we're going to a place of criticism. I think we need to make sure that we keep this in context, recognize how much we've managed to scale up our testing, and recognize the work of which we have done. And so when we're comparing it to persons who are waiting hours and hours and hours for tests, in incredibly long lines and waiting days and days, in some cases weeks, for results, and when we're delivering ours in less than 24 hours, I think that the best comparison to make is how we measure up to other jurisdictions. And there's no question that with the feedback which we're getting, we're doing a great job.
All right, thank you. Premier, should the recent increase in cases under investigations and cases of local transmission set off alarms for those students and teachers going back to school next month? And do you have any plans to test children at schools?
Whether or not it sets off alarms, I wouldn't say so. I would say that we have to make sure that we continue to make sure that we remain vigilant. And so from an overall perspective, absolutely, but just in the exact same way as which I have said regarding the upcoming election, if there is a need and it presents itself from the advice of the Ministry of Health, to expand our testing capacity to possibly test students and others, then we'll make sure that that's available. And so we have that capacity. We continue to increase our capacity. We've continued to acquire additional equipment, and we're going to push that forward. But the best defense against making sure that we don't have increased local transmission is to ensure that people follow the rules. It's just a very, very simple thing to do. Follow the rules. I don't know if you wish to add anything, Minister.
Good evening. Minister of Education, you stated reference to schools opening, but there's we've heard nothing about buses and transportation for students, the protocol for students and transportation.
And thank you for bringing that up, Trevor. Just today, we received the schedule from the Department of from DPT of the bus schedule for school reopening on September the 14th, and of course that will be sent out. It was only received today, so the idea is to not only use public buses but to augment them with with mini buses as well.
Thank you. Premier, in the last few days, there's been statements about your loyalty coming from Opposition Deputy Leader Leah Scott. Did this touch a nerve, or how did this make you feel personally about these comments?
Yeah, man. Not going to dignify it with a response.
Sorry?
I will not dignify that with a response.
Appreciate that. Thank you much. Minister Hayward. TNN's received many complaints from individuals that's having serious issues dealing with personnel at financial assistance. One woman stated to me her disability, she has a disability and has a family to take care of. She's been confirmed recently to start FA, financial assistance, starting October the 1st. Her benefits, her unemployment benefits are expired. Her challenge is any advice for her for the next month. And her exact question is, what is she to do, starve or beg? Start begging for food.
Trevor, the reason why we put in place financial assistance and the supplemental unemployment benefit is so that persons who need assistance actually receive it. I can't speak on persons' individual situations, but I would ask if that person does have a specific complaint, raise it with the Director of Financial Assistance. But what I would say is that the Department of Financial Assistance have put in place individuals that will ably be able to assist persons with submission of the application, so they come in on a timely matter, or they can call the hotline if they need additional assistance. But certainly what we don't want is people in Bermuda worrying about where their next meal is coming from, and that's exactly why we've put this assistance in place.
Premier, I don't know if this question is for you, but a member of DCF, Department of Child and Family Service, was charged this week for offenses, assault on a child, and this individual is still working. Why is this individual shouldn't she be on leave or suspended?
I have no idea of the situation of which you speak about, but I'm happy to raise the matter with the head of the public service, when the head of the public service, who is responsible for personnel matters in government, when we meet tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Thank you. Same question. Next question for you, sir. Premier, can you confirm or deny reports that a complaint verbally or otherwise have been filed with a senior civil servant and the Speaker of the House against a sitting PLP member of Parliament alleging harassment bordering on sexual harassment? It is further alleged that these complaints have been brought to your attention.
Here's what I can say. I can say that I was made aware of these complaints at no time earlier than last week, Wednesday. I sent a letter to the Speaker of the House today to ask for an explanation. It is something that I take very seriously.
Would this individual still be brought forward as a candidate coming up on this election?
What I will say is that without any facts of any case, I'm not going to pass judgment on anyone. What I will do is examine. That is the reason why I've written to the Speaker of the House to ask for the information. I became aware of this last week, and I consider it incredibly serious. The Progressive Labor Party has put in place a policy, a code of conduct, which specifically prohibits or has strong action against harassment. It is not something that was known to me prior. If it was something known to me prior, we would have acted. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I take a look at it, examine the situation, but I'm not going to pass judgment without the full judgment of the facts.
Thank you. Thank you all very much, and good evening. Fiona McWhirter from the Royal Gazette. Firstly, for yourself, Mr. Premier, has Michael Scott retired from politics?
As I gave an answer in a press conference yesterday, the Progressive Labor Party's internal election selection process is one that it undergoes, and in the time that it is appropriate to make an announcement, that announcement will be made not at a government press conference, but at a Progressive Labor Party press conference.
But does that answer if Michael Scott has retired from politics?
It does not answer your question, no.
It does not. Okay, thank you. Minister of Health, we've heard some concerns from residents if they do feel that they need to travel for essential reasons, that they are finding it difficult to find appropriate testing facilities that will provide a PCR test in the turnaround time that's necessary. Is there any way for the government or the ministry to provide perhaps a list or a database of these sorts of places, perhaps in the gateway cities?
If I understand your question, you're speaking about persons that require a PCR test prior to leaving Bermuda.
Sorry, my apologies. The pre-departure test for coming back to Bermuda.
Okay, so you're referring to residents that are returning to Bermuda and having difficulty getting a PCR test. I know of some companies. I'm not quite sure that we would be in a position to list all of the names of the companies, that do provide PCR tests. I know there's some in Atlanta, and there's other places. That's something that obviously the travelers would be responsible for ensuring that they take the necessary due diligence if they are traveling and returning to Bermuda to ensure that they have a PCR test and it's from a reputable company. However, having said that, in the event, though it is encouraged for them to do that, in the event that they are unable to do so and obtain the test results prior to their return to Bermuda, they will, as well as everyone else, be tested upon arrival and then required to quarantine and test out on day 8.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I think I heard Dr. Peake Ball speaking earlier this week with regards to perhaps getting more resources for contact tracers. Is that something you're looking at the moment, and what sort of figures would we be talking about?
Well, if we do see more cases, then obviously we need to have more persons that are contact tracing. However, in addition to the resources that we currently have, and we are looking to bolster our human resources to assist with contact tracing, but we are excited about the app that the Premier spoke about earlier, insofar as using technology to assist us with respect to the important role of contact tracing.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mr. Premier, with regards to some adverts, I believe that were on, adverts in quotation marks, on Instagram and Twitter, Bermuda government social media accounts, the acting chairman of the One Bermuda Alliance has today claimed that these breached the ministerial code of conduct, particularly at a time of a general election. Just wondering whether or not you can tell us whether or not these will be investigated, and if so, by whom, investigated as to whether or not there's any breach of the code.
Well, in order for there to be a breach of the code, in order for there to be an investigation, or any investigation, would have to be a breach of the code, and there was no breach of any code. I guess I would say I welcome Trevor Moniz back to politics. He told us a month ago that he was retiring, but as he's now serving as chairman of the One Bermuda Alliance, I guess that was a short-lived retirement. The government of Bermuda puts out communication at all times. This communication was prepared for the third anniversary of the party's election. This was done, and I received an email actually on July 16th with the particular drafts of those items. There was some delay over cut match and other things insofar as getting those things out, but there were matters that were posted on sites before the election. This is not advertising. This is standard information that is given, and so I don't think that it's a challenge when we're reminding people about the tax breaks which are available to businesses, or the fact that people can get interest-free home loans to make their homes livable for their senior citizens. This is the work which the government has accomplished. In one case, the opposition will say, oh, the government hasn't done anything, and in the next case they will complain if the government, through normal forms of action of informing the public, will say that the government should not tell people what's going on. So I'm not going to take this press conference to dignify that level of small political chatter. The fact is that we will continue to inform the public when it comes to the government. That is what these press conferences are for. That is what our statements are for. That is what social media is for. And we are proud of the communications efforts, because I know the citizens of this country want to know the services that are there for them. And we are not going to stop that for the new chair of the One Bermuda Alliance, Trevor Moniz, or anyone else.
Thank you very much. And on a similar note, he's also raised concerns with regards to the announcement that was made by Minister Furbert this afternoon about the Bermuda Paper Company, a belief as well that that was some sort of, I guess, encouragement for certain people perhaps to vote for the PLP, being as you're in government at the moment.
I find it completely laughable that persons would think that a government who has pledged to support homegrown industries, that has amended its procurement code of practice to make sure that preference is given to black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and businesses owned by persons with disabilities, and the government acting on its platform pledges and making sure that we support a new company to increase employment in Bermuda is something that the opposition would be opposed to. So I'm just going to leave Mr. Trevor Moniz. He said that he's retired from politics. Clearly he doesn't want to step away, but we're going to focus on the work at hand. And I'm proud of the work that we've done in reforming procurement, and we're just going to go ahead and press on. I mean, we need to talk about what's necessary to make sure that Bermuda can be a safe and secure place. And I think that when we have persons who are stepping up, taking a risk, manufacturing things here on the island and providing jobs, it is a responsibility of the government to support that. I don't know. Why does Mr. Moniz want us to keep buying paper from, I don't know where, Butterfield in Dallas or somewhere else? The fact is, we want to make sure that we support homegrown industry, and we're not going to apologize for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you all very much.
My name is Mackenzie Cole-Tuckett, reporting for Media Maya. My first question is for Minister Rebane. You mentioned that students will be able to arrive at school at 8:30 a.m. In the recent Public School Live Facebook interview with the Commissioner of Education called Reopening Responsibly, a viewer asked, will school start and end times be staggered by year level to avoid crowding at drop-off and pickup? If this is so, when will this be communicated to parents?
And thank you for that question, Mackenzie. As you heard me say, that principals have just returned to school this week and teachers will be returning next week. The principals are busy looking at their particular schools to see how they will implement some of these guidelines. So the short answer to your question is yes. For some schools, there will be staggered drop-offs, but that will be determined by the principal and her staff on how that could work and if it's going to be appropriate for that school, and parents will be made aware of that before school opens.
Thank you. For teachers who are unable to return to the classroom due to being a vulnerable person, will their classes be taught by substitute teachers or will they be engaged in remote learning?
I did speak to that a few press conferences ago when talking about the extremely vulnerable persons. If there are teachers, they will be teaching from remotely to the classroom, and when there are students that are in the same position, they will be learning remotely and they will be tuning into their classrooms remotely.
Okay, thank you. Knowing that students frequent the city after school, who will be responsible for crowd control at the bus terminal when school resumes?
And thank you for that question. That is something that came up today, and the commissioner had talked about it with there's a group that meets to talk about security, and so we've had a response from the police, and it's something that is being looked into. The Department of Transportation has also sent a response to that to us, and they intend to have additional staff put on during the school times to herd people to the buses more quickly. But what we are hoping, especially in the pandemic era that we're in, that students will be using the buses that are being put on specifically for schools, as well as the minibuses, and just going straight to where they need to go versus congregating in Hamilton. As we talked about, and I mentioned about the S3 and the S4 students, and we've designated that students under the age of 16 should be in school full time. We're expecting the senior schools to release schedules that talk about partial attendance to school for students that are S3 and S4, and using hybrid teaching methods. So that should alleviate some of the problems of some of the older students being in Hamilton as well.
So those students and parents can expect to hear from their principals and respective teachers in the next coming weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, before school opens.
Before school opens, yes. Thank you. Mr. Premier, you indicated at last week's press conference that you were to meet with the governor and planned to discuss the judiciary accepting the 10% pay cut. Is there any update on this, or does the judiciary's position remain the same?
I did not get a specific update from the governor yesterday on that. We did meet, and the matter, I wait for him to get the resolution. There was conversations and discussions around that, and unfortunately it does believe, I don't know if there's been any further progress made. I know the Chief Justice has accepted. I do know the fact that the Registrar of the Supreme Court has accepted. I'm unaware of other persons who have accepted. I reiterated the government's position in regards to this. I believe that it is not acceptable, and the government is exploring all legal options of which it has in this case and instance. And so we will, I will wait an update again, but you know, we are unfortunate in a situation where contracts are there and persons need to voluntarily make these changes. But we are looking for other ways in which we might be able to force them, because we think that it is incumbent upon all persons in a period of sacrifice to recognize the sacrifice that is being made across the board and join in with that sacrifice.
Thank you. Minister Wilson, Mr. Premier, Minister Hayward, Minister Urbane, and Minister Ming, I would like to thank you on behalf of Media Maya for all of you, your colleagues, and your teams, all of your hard work over these past 5 months. So thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Yep. All right. Thank you very much. A little bit of a longer press conference than normal, but there was a lot of important information to get out. As I said, we'll be discussing how we're going to revise these press conferences to make sure that we can continue to get information to persons in the days and weeks ahead as we reopen our schools, continue to reopen our economy, and continue to do what is necessary to keep this virus at bay inside of our community. So look forward to those future updates when the Cabinet will address you next week. We will not be able to all be together. The Minister of Health and I will be doing joint press conferences, and also individual ministers will be sure to continue to give updates on matters inside of their ministry. So with that, I wish everyone in Bermuda a very happy and pleasant weekend. Thank you, Bermuda. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Bermuda, and good evening.